Dr. Sarah Saska, and we're here at the Move the Dial Summit. We're in the Facebook queue, and I'm here with Dr. Jackie Steele, who's come to us all the way from Tokyo to chat, to hang out. So Jackie,
yes.
What have you been working on lately?
Well, lately I think one of the interesting things that we're seeing a shift in the conversation in diversity and inclusion in Japan, which is really interesting and fun, is there's been a lot more focus on the role of sort of caregiving and unpaid caregiving as something that adds a brake on women's equality in the workplace. And so the conversation is shifting more to think about how men could be supported and how fathers can be supported to take their caregiving paternity leave, or if it's about finding work strategies that allow men to show up as fathers. I've certainly been working on a concept called chichikatsu, which is about how we think about father's empowerment, because in Japan we've had a lot of conversation for the last 8 years of Womenomics that is looking at women's empowerment in the workplace and women's empowerment in paid labor. But of course, so that sort of josei no katsuyaku term and the josei katsuyaku needs to be met with an equal other side of the coin. On the other side of the formula, you need to have father's empowerment. So you need chichikatsu or chichioya no katsuyaku. And so that's an exciting thing to see, that there's finally an interrogation of masculinity, that D&I is not just about fixing women to fit into the male model, that now it's really finally morphing into being a little bit broader conversation about how diverse men can be accommodated and be allowed to be caregivers. Elder care is a big thing in Japan as well. And so that's an exciting shift in the conversation that I'm seeing in Japan.
And so I totally hear you on shifting beyond sort of a women-centric piece and really leveling that up in that way. In terms of the elder care piece, which I think, in Canada, we need to be a lot more intentional about who's doing the caregiving in your context right now.
Well, so in Japan, disproportionately, it's always been women and daughters-in-law, really, who were expected to do all the elder care. That is shifting a lot because Japan is facing a crisis of both an aging population and declining birth rates for the last 30 years. And so we see that there's going to be a tremendous shift in the population between now and 2060. And that population loss means that with not enough children being born, and often only children in the family, if you only have one child in both families, then when those two single children marry, which one of them is going to look after their own parents? And so we're seeing more men, more sons that are actually being called upon to make sure that they can take on those roles as well, or they are the only one able to take on that role. Disproportionately, I have to say, it's definitely still women. But it is shifting, and I think it'll continue to intensify, and I think that's in some ways a real issue why workplaces have to now think about unpaid labor and unpaid caregiving as not just a women's issue. It is now a much broader issue of also elder care that is going to hit particularly the crunch families that are dual income, both in the paid labor. They have children that they're trying to manage and raise through the public child care system, and there is excellent national child care, which is beautiful. Not enough spots in Tokyo, but there's still excellent provision. But elder care, there's still a gap, and so the government's trying to bring in more elder care facilities, but there's definitely a shortfall. So,
I guess what else are you kind of digging into or exploring right now?
Well, I mean, connected to that, one of the pieces of research that I've been really just devouring with excitement is around emotional intelligence. And one book in particular by Stephen Stein around the emotional EQ leader. And I think the research out of that book that I find so phenomenally interesting is that you see all of in some ways I think that the caregiving, the unpaid caregiving in the home, be it child rearing, be it elder care, be it relationship building with neighbors and community, all of the work that women do unpaid is such a tremendous training ground for being an inclusive leader. And we never sort of acknowledge and validate that all of that experience that women just have been developing through their unpaid roles bring strong communication skills, emotional intelligence, empathy, the ability to work across multiple stakeholders who are different. And so if workplaces could really rethink their paradigm of how they define excellence or leadership, And if you want to have teams that can be inclusive and led by inclusive leaders, you're going to need more women with all of those skill sets that they've developed. And that's sort of the argument I'm making in Japan for chichikatsu, because I'm saying when the men are working 16-hour days, when they're never allowed to be involved in raising their own children and being with their children and being with their own parents, in going to the sports ball, the baseball games, in going to taking their kids to swimming lessons, in just doing the mundane laundry and dealing with a child in the middle of a temper tantrum, if you don't have that training ground for your own emotional intelligence, all of those men are not being equipped with the skills and the training ground and the experience to be inclusive leaders.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.